Okay, it's now 3:05. So I think we can just go ahead and start. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us in our webinar today. I am Alex. I work in the comms team in the Low Carbon Contracts Company, and today we are going to be discussing, as part of Net Zero Week, sustainable aviation fuels. I'll be walking everyone through the logistics. And just to say that this is part of Binary Carbon's Net Zero Week 2025, the UK's official National Awareness Week, and also the biggest net zero conference. So let's just move on to slide number 2. So logistics for today, we expect that this webinar will be running for 45 minutes. We welcome questions throughout, and we will be dedicating some time at the end to answer everything that has been asked. Session will be recorded, and if you missed out, don't worry. The slides and the recording will be shared with Binary Carbon and also on our corporate website over at lowcarboncontracts.uk. And of course, we will ask everyone to please keep your cameras on hold and also to keep yourself on mute. So without further ado, let me just pass this over to my colleagues.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex. Hi, I'm Kerry. I'm a policy manager at LCCC, focus on new schemes. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the content on SAF today. We are supporting the Department for Transport in the development of their revenue certainty mechanism, which will be supporting the production of sustainable aviation fuel in the UK. The work's been funded by the DFT, and the content today is all information that is public and has been made public by the DFT. All of the content here is basically provided by virtue of our advisory role, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have. We'll keep them for the end. We've got the Q&A function going, so please do drop them in there and we'll try our best to answer them. Next, Alex. Next slide, please. Cool. So who is LCCC? We are a Low Carbon Contracts Company, LCCC. We were established under electricity market reform to be the independent private law counterparty to the Low Carbon Electricity CFD, Contracts for Difference, and the settlement body for the capacity market. We are operationally independent. We're an arm's length body of government. The Secretary of State for DESNZ, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, are our sole shareholder, and we are a not-for-profit. We're politically impartial. Everything we do is encompassed in our mission, vision, and guiding principles. So our mission is to accelerate the delivery of net zero. The vision is to shape and implement schemes that enable this, so enable low carbon investment at least cost to the consumer, which is critical. And our guiding principles reflect those two things. So everything we do is around maintaining investor confidence in the schemes that we run and minimising costs of those schemes to consumers. Things that we've delivered to date that you may well be familiar with. This is the Contracts for Difference scheme, as I've mentioned, in the capacity market. We've now got 363 low carbon electricity CFDs on the CFD programme, 470 capacity providers that hold agreements with us. We support up to 12 different technologies through both of those schemes. And more recently, you may be familiar with our work in the hydrogen space, hoping to have 11 hydrogen contracts under HAR1 that we will be the counterparty to as well. We began as a kind of CFD counterparty and capacity market settlement agent, but that role has definitely expanded over recent years. Some of the other schemes are on the bottom right of the slide here. We've moved into hydrogen, as I've mentioned, but also carbon capture and storage technologies as well. Next slide, please, Alex. This slide really demonstrates the breadth of our portfolio, and our role across each of these different schemes varies depending on the stage of its development. So in the kind of bright green across the top there, we've got schemes that are already operational, some of which have already been mentioned. In the kind of sludgy green, the khaki green, things that are in implementation phase. So these are schemes that we have a confirmed role in the delivery of, that we're in the process of building behind the scenes. We also act in an advisory capacity, so that's the capacity in which we're hosting this webinar today in relation to sustainable aviation fuels, which you see there on the top right. And myself and my colleague Luke, who'll speak to a few of the slides later and introduce himself, are in the policy team within LCCC. So we provide that trusted and independent advice to government departments in the design and development of their new low carbon schemes. And a lot of what we do is around incorporating lessons learned from our experience in the delivery of the CFD and the capacity market, hydrogen and CCS, and applying that to how these new business models are designed to set them up for success. Thanks, Alex. Next slide, please. Cool. So what are we going to cover today? Today's agenda is obviously focused on sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF, you may hear us calling it. We'll run you through a little bit about the technology, the policy landscape and the backdrop to where this has all come from, a little bit more about the revenue certainty mechanism, so how that business model is currently going to be designed, and the levy that will be placed on fuel suppliers to fund that. We can go into a little bit of detail about the timelines for delivery, and then, as I said, try and leave some time at the end for questions. Hand over to my colleague Luke.
Hi everyone, my name's Luke Ellis. I work in the policy team here at LCCC, and I'm going to run through section 1 from that agenda on the previous slide. So the challenge here is the UK has legally binding net zero targets and carbon budgets, and within that, transport is a big contributor, accounted for 34% of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions in 2022, and that includes international aviation and shipping. Within that, aviation is the second largest contributor in 2022, but is set to overtake road vehicles by 2040. There's a variety of measures, but some technological solutions are in relatively early development. So why is the UK interested in SAF to address this? It's available as a drop-in fuel with fossil aviation fuel and does not require modifications to existing aircraft fleets. Associated greenhouse gas emissions from SAF are on average 70% less than fossil aviation fuel across the life cycle. And a thriving domestic SAF industry can increase investment, growth, support jobs, and improve the UK's fuel security. Next slide, please, Alex. So it's worth noting here on this slide, as we talk through what these SAFs are, that this is one way of categorising the fuels. The language on this slide is consistent with government policy. So on the left here, we've got HEFA SAFs, or hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids. These are currently available at a commercial scale production, and that is the conversion of oils or fats into advanced fuels. In the middle here, we have non-HEFA. There's various ways of converting waste, solids and gases that contain carbon into ethanol and then into SAFs. This is associated with a higher cost of production compared with the HEFA SAFs. And common methods might include gasification and Fischer-Tropsch. This converts a solid feedstock into syngas, a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen, and then into liquid waxes, which can be upgraded to produce advanced fuels. Feedstock can include municipal solid waste and waste biomass. There's also alcohol to jet, which converts feedstock into alcohols and then into advanced fuels. Feedstock can include agricultural and woody waste and industrial off-gases. And then on the right, there's power to liquid fuels, which are produced using low carbon power sources, green hydrogen or direct air carbon capture. This is an earlier stage of development than the other two with lower technology readiness levels. Next slide, please, Alex. So on the left here, there is a diagram which shows the SAF value chain and the flow of money and fuel around it. So I'll just talk through the information on the right, which correlates to that. So feedstock providers adhere to eligibility criteria so that downstream actors can receive government support. Producers then act as an off-taker for wastes, captured carbon, green electricity. Fuel will typically transfer ownership onto a supplier before the formal assessment point. Suppliers purchase the SAF and blend with their jet fuel mix, utilising pipeline and freight networks to transport it. SAF ownership at the assessment point is with the suppliers to receive the SAF mandate certificates required to meet their annual obligations, and we'll talk through the SAF mandate in more detail. Airlines then purchase the SAF from suppliers, receiving the fuel at the airport. and the UK will need to monitor risks of tankering, which is filling up more than is needed in one location to avoid paying a higher price in another. Airports act as facilitators for airlines rather than fuel purchasers, and some third parties or airlines may operate fuel farms nearby or on site. Next slide, please, Alex. So the policy landscape here, there are some barriers to deployment. These are novel technologies, and there's associated uncertainty with some of these first-of-a-kind technologies. There's competition for resources to be used as feedstock. So biofuel used in biodiesel compete for the same feedstocks as HEFA SAFs. Similarly, there's competition for finance with other low-carbon technologies. And currently an unclear market price, and so uncertainty over future revenues. So the Department for Transport have three overarching objectives, which are to create secure and growing demand for SAF, accelerate the development of projects towards first investment decisions, and secure investment by supporting successful investment decisions. Next slide, please. And these next three slides are going to run through some of the policy interventions for each of these objectives. So firstly, for creating secure and growing demand for SAF, there is the SAF mandate. This is a legal obligation on fuel suppliers in the UK to supply increasing proportions of SAF over time, starting at 2% in 2025, up to 10% in 2030, and 22% in 2040. It's a volume-based scheme with eligibility criteria. All SAF must receive minimum greenhouse gas emissions reductions of 40% relative to a fossil fuel comparator. The greater the saving, the greater number of certificates that they'll receive, which they can claim against their obligations. There's a separate obligation for power to liquid fuels to accelerate their development, 0.2% in 2028 and 3.5% in 2040. Both obligations have a buyout mechanism with prices set at a level that incentivizes the supply of SAF over the use of the buyout, which is £4.70 a litre for the main obligation and slightly higher at £5 per litre for the power to liquid obligation due to the higher cost of production. And you can see some of these targets displayed on the right. HEFA, there's also a cap on HEFA that can be that can contribute to the SAF mandate from 2027. So its maximum contribution is 71% in 2030 and reducing to 35% in 2040. SAF is zero rated under the UK ETS, so airlines can also claim a reduction in their ETS obligations. It's worth noting as well that eligible SAF must be from sustainable waste or residues derived from biomass, fossil fuel waste that can otherwise not be avoided, renewable or nuclear power as well. And where hydrogen is used as a fuel precursor or as the final fuel, it must be derived from residual waste, recycled carbon fuel, or from low carbon energy. Next slide, please. So the second objective, accelerating the development of projects towards their FIDs. The Advanced Fuels Fund was launched in 2022, and the first round was in December of that year. 5 projects share an award of £82.5 million. In November 2023, DFT announced the winners of the second round, so 9 projects will receive a share of £53 million. Then the UK SAF Clearinghouse was launched to provide coordination and grant support for the testing and certification of new production pathways. This is in partnership with the University of Sheffield and was launched to address technology risk by providing that coordination and grant support. It aims to crowd in private investment, accelerating projects through development stages and on towards final investment decisions. 135 million already awarded to 13 projects, with a further 63 million again available in the third application window. And then on to the next slide, please. So for the third objective, securing investment by supporting successful FIDs, is the revenue certainty mechanism. On the 14th of May, the SAF bill was laid in Parliament to take necessary powers to implement the revenue certainty mechanism. The mechanism will be based on a guaranteed strike price akin to the electricity CFD, which we've mentioned, and the cost of payments to producers and running the scheme will be funded by a variable levy on fuel suppliers in the UK. And I'll hand back to Kerry now to run through that in more detail.
Thanks, Luke. Next slide, please, Alex. Thank you. Great, so there's quite a lot of information on this slide, but essentially what we're trying to do here is show in a diagram form the various different flows of product, so SAF, and money and certificates in the proposed revenue certainty mechanism. So it's perhaps worth just starting with the baseline that Luke mentioned, that this mechanism is based on the similar electricity CFD process flows. So in this instance, the supplier would be a fuel supplier, whereas in the CFD, it's an electricity supplier. And the producer here is a SAF producer as opposed to a renewable energy generator. So if we just go from 1 to 5, at number 1, the flows of product there go from the supplier who purchases SAF from the producer, and airlines which will purchase a blended SAF and jet fuel product from the supplier. In terms of money flows, if you look at the blue arrows there labelled number 2, that indicates where the supplier will pay a market price for SAF to the producer, and the airline will pay its respective market price to the supplier. Number 3 indicates the relationship between the producer and the counterparty. So there'll be a two-way flow of money there between the producer of sustainable aviation fuel and a counterparty. The flow will be determined obviously on the difference between the strike price and the reference price. So it could be going in either direction dependent on that. And number 4, with a similar two-way relationship between the fuel supplier and the counterparty for the purposes of administering the SAF levy, which you see in the dashed green box there off to the left-hand side. So a two-way flow of money depending on collections and returns. Number 5 indicates the role of the SAF mandate, which Luke helpfully talked through earlier. This will be awarding certificates to suppliers when they hit their obligation, which is obviously increasing over time. DFT, the Department for Transport, are the administrator of the SAF mandates and will be checking eligibility against information provided and awarding certificates on that basis. Next slide, please, Alex. Great. So the starting point for the levy, which will be placed on fuel suppliers, is the design of the supplier obligation, which is the levy that funds the contracts for difference scheme. The minded to position is to have a market share approach, and that will be based on the quantity of fossil fuel supplied by fuel suppliers in the UK. The decision to levy suppliers is because they sit quite high up the value chain, and the cost can therefore be spread between freight and passenger aviation. It's administratively simple, and of course the intention is that suppliers will benefit from SAF being available in the UK market in order to fulfil their mandate obligations. The definition of who a supplier is will be captured and the same as that in the mandate. So any entity owning 15.9 terajoules or more of aviation turbine fuel at the assessment point. Thanks, Alex. Next slide, please. Great. So this is intended to give you an idea of the shape and size of the revenue certainty mechanism, or certainly the potential shape and size. So we anticipate that contracts will be 15 years in duration. And the intention is to provide time-limited support. So primary powers in the SAF bill that was laid in May give the Department for Transport 10 years from that legislation coming into force to award contracts. And that can be extended by up to 5 years at a time. The current analysis done by DFT analysts and economists shows that if the reference price is lower than the strike price, a non-HEFA plant producing around 100 kilotons of SAF a year over their 15-year contract would cost levied industry an average of £100 to £150 million annually, which amounts to around £2 billion for each 15-year contract. The central scenario and analysis conducted by DFT is also showing at this point in time that the impact downstream on the cost of airline tickets will be fairly minimal, with fluctuations anticipated to be by no more than £1.50 a year on average. Thanks, Alex. Next slide, please. Great, so timelines, when is this all going to be delivered by? We've mentioned a few times now, the SAF bill has already been laid. So that was a really big milestone, giving all the kind of underpinning provisions and powers required to set up both the levy and the revenue certainty mechanism. That was on the 14th of May and is passing through Parliament currently. At some point between now and the end of December 2026, all of the secondary legislation will also be in place that will capture the design of the levy. Obviously, milestones that need to be hit before that, there's a heads of terms that needs to be developed. So lots of thinking going on at the Department for Transport currently, and engagement with industry on exactly how that should be designed. Contracts will then be awarded, and it's not until around 2030 that we anticipate the first operations of any of these plants, and therefore payments being made under the revenue certainty mechanism. Thanks, Alex. Next slide, please. And I think that brings us to the end of our content, but we hopefully have time for questions now. So I think we've had the Q&A running. Let's just see if anything's cropped up. If not, please do pop them in now. Silence. We must have covered everything that anyone wants to know, which is great news.
Yes, so we've allocated some time. I think we have the rest of the hour, but if we don't have any questions, and I think that we can just end early, I think we'll just give everyone until the 3:30 mark to ask anything they'd like to. If not, then thank you for coming. Thank you for your participation. If you have any questions after this webinar ends, please do feel free to forward it over to our info at inbox. You can see it in the slide here, info@lowcarboncontracts.uk. We do have a question. Do you mind popping it into the Q&A section? Oh, sorry. No, there are some.
Just doing.
I see. Great. So again, the Q&A function is just integrated into the Microsoft Teams webinar. So if you have any queries, please do just put them in and then we will have a look at them. So let me just read off some questions now. We have one asking, will there be a requirement for data verification?
So I'm assuming that this is with the producers and their requirement to provide data for the purposes of us providing a subsidy, which of course, yes, there will be various assurance processes baked into this. In order to make any kind of payment, we will need to have visibility of metered output of the production plant in question. And if we're talking about it on the supplier side, then yes, there is already a very, there's an established process in the DfT SAF mandate unit for receiving data from aviation fuel suppliers for the purposes of awarding certificates under the SAF mandate and to ensure they're meeting their obligations. So yes, there should be data verification processes built into every step of this. Hopefully that answers the question, but feel free to put more detail in if that wasn't what you were getting at.
So I see we've got also a couple of hands up. I have turned on the meeting chat in case you're having some troubles with the Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to just plug it into the meeting chat and we can address those. But I'll just move on to the next question now. So can I ask if these slides will be sent out after the recording? Yes, they will be. So in partnership with Binary Carbon, I believe that this webinar will be uploaded onto the website and to YouTube, but we will also be sending this out onto our corporate website. Oh. Oh, I just read Michelle's message. I'm so sorry about that, Michelle. I don't know what happened, but what's a webinar without a tech issue, you know? So let me just give a bit more time for the questions.
Michelle's put one in the chat. Wanted to find out if you could provide clarity on who the obligation is placed on in terms of third-party suppliers. Is it the supplier at the duty point only? Yes, I believe so, Michelle. So the levied parties will be, if you're talking about the levy here, then the levied parties will be the suppliers.
I think Michelle did have a follow-up.
She's kind of responding.
Yeah, I see. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So just give it a bit more for any queries. In case we have anything, we do want to note that some of the questions might be a bit out of our league to answer. So those ones we unfortunately are not really in the position.
Any kind of technical questions and things like that can direct to our policy at inbox. So I think on the next slide, we've got our info at inbox as well. Just given the kind of position that we're in as advisors of existing low carbon technology schemes and counterparties, we're not necessarily in a position to ask any kind of technical questions in relation to the sustainable aviation fuel technology itself. So please do send them over and we'll try our best, or we'll forward those on to people that we're working with in DFT to get back to you.
I'll just give it another minute to see if there's any further questions that we are able to answer. So yes, like my colleague Carrie said, we're sorry if we can't answer everything at the moment. If you do have any unanswered questions, please feel free to reach out to us in the above mentioned info at inbox. And we'll be sure to reach back out to you once we're able to confirm any of the information that we need to have approved by DFT or anything beforehand. But in the meantime, I do want to share that there are more live webinars available and that delegates should take a look at the full agenda of events via netzeroweek.com. As I said, this is in conjunction with Binary Carbon, and we are super grateful to be able to kind of share all of this information with all of you. But yes, so I think I don't see any more questions coming in. So I think that we are good to wrap up now. So thank you everyone for coming. Again, we're sorry we are not able to answer the questions. If you do have any, please do reach out to us in our email that's on the slide as pictured. But if not, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you a happy Wednesday.